against my enemies.
Hello there.
Yeah.
What is up? I am
See, you
Ron.
wanted to save you.
This is
And then
Monster
learn how to
Fuzz
raise
Podcast, the 7 Days of Samhain, bitches. Yeah, folks, we are in the midst of all of this stuff. I'll also say, if you're watching on YouTube, not every episode on this whole 7 Days of Sound is going to be on YouTube. There's not a video component to every episode because Eamon is doing his own one and I will potentially be doing my own thing as well for one or two of the days.
Do a video that was just darkness.
You could do if you wanted,
create.
but
I won't be doing
it's
that.
not worth it. It's not worth
No,
it.
I'm not doing that.
It's not worth the effort. So yeah, so check out our podcast feed on Spotify or anything if you're wanting to get every episode, because that's where they will be. Yeah, and so we're in the midst of it. So I recorded with Adam from the Weekly Creep there a couple of weeks back. Adam's a podcaster, he's been doing it quite a while as well. And he has a new podcast coming out. So I'll put the link in the description. The name escapes me at the minute. He talks about it on this episode. And basically what he's doing is he lives in Texas. He's from Dublin.
Okay.
But he went over to Texas and he's basically going out into the field, interviewing people about ghosty stuff, kind of similar to what Tim is doing, really, I suppose, and talking about paranormal experiences. And
So like in spooky places or just...
either or, like he's
Right.
going to actually, he's interviewing people who have like real accounts and stuff like that. And so he's putting together a podcast where it's basically all of those interviews. And he said he's having a real good time. So basically we just sat down, we chatted about that, we chatted about some of my stuff. We just had a bit of a back and forth kind of discussion. It wasn't necessarily an interview on either terms, more of just a chat that we had between us. But it was great, it was good fun. I think everyone here will enjoy it. Yeah, and as well, if you want to support us a bit more, head on over to our Patreon. Access to the Discord, amazing. What a time to be alive. You get your exclusive episodes. We're recording some of those this evening. You will get access to like 4 years worth of that now. 50 odd episodes. Go and check it out. It's definitely worth it, or is it? Who knows? If they have any spooky stories, and any like Halloween, any stuff,
if you
where to
have
send them.
little scary things that you'd like us to read out on the podcast, monsterfuzzpodcast@gmail.com, and we will read out your terrifying tales on a mini fuzz.
Absolutely. Without further ado, check out Adam. Over and out. Adam, I think we're live.
Lovely.
What's
How
the
are you
crack?
doing today?
Doing all right, man. How are you doing?
I'm not bad. Do you know, so just to get this started on like
Oh,
a
yeah.
weird
Cool.
thing, I know like I messaged you the other day.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a very good friend of mine
Right.
who is also a listener of the podcast,
Mm-hmm.
but he is a solicitor in Dublin.
Oh, right.
So he's the fella that I like reference. I'm like, well, my friend is a solicitor.
Okay,
and
right. Cool.
So he was scrolling through like some mad website one day looking for some like, I don't know, some weird political newspaper that he was like, it was issued in like 1997 for 13 weeks.
Right.
And he came across the IU Fora publications from like the early 90s. And
Oh, wow.
it's also I guess it's the Irish UFO Research Association.
Right. Cool.
Similar to Bufora, who
Yeah.
are the British UFO Research Association. And before there was the Irish UFO Research Association, there was the Bufora Irish chapter of them.
Oh, wow. Okay. It's like the
So I've
it's like the Freemasons. It's like them or something.
it's man, like the nerddom coming off of this stuff. And I've seen a couple of pictures like that they've thrown in, and I'm like, man, this is pure 90s Irish gold. You know what I mean?
Oh, really? Yeah.
Oh yeah. So I do have, and I'll send you copies of this as well, like so as you can like. It's a treasure, honestly. Like I've been going through it. There's a lot of crap, but there's a few like little nuggets in there, and I've picked out a few that I'll read to you at some stage today.
Class.
I'm trying to find my favorite one.
So this is
I think
all
this is it.
Irish UFO stories, basically.
Yeah.
Class.
And in fairness to the boys who were doing it, boys and girls, actually, it was a joint thing. They would actually go and like contact the airports in the local area and air traffic control
Okay.
and all. Like they did, it looks like they did a really good job. Like, you know what I mean?
Cool.
Yeah, hold on. Let me find this one. Sorry, there was a really good one that I liked. So my wife woke up in the middle of the night. She gets up early. And it was like, I don't know, 2 or 3 in the morning. And I was
Uh-huh.
like, wait until you hear this.
All right,
She's
yeah,
just
yeah, of
lying in
course.
bed, like, please leave me alone. Go
I
back to
feel like we've
Ireland.
done once or twice. We've had a couple of write-ins from Irish people about like UFO sightings, all right, but in terms of myself, like I haven't seen nothing over here. Have you had any? Did you like when you were because for my listeners that don't know your scenario, you're now in Texas, right?
Yeah, yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I'm in Houston. Yeah. Um, so I've never had, I literally just got a voice message from my little sister
Hmm.
before starting this. I was listening to it. Before I moved abroad, I don't think I ever had anything weird happen.
Okay.
Like throughout, like the house that we grew up in, like nothing. And then I lived in Toronto for a couple of years and
All
then
right.
went back home for a year. And within that year, I'm starting to think I might actually be guilty for this.
Mm.
Um, my parents' house is like actively a haunted
Spooked.
house.
Oh,
Like,
class. That's
yeah,
probably your fault. You brought it on him.
I'm not even, yeah, like I think so, like honestly, like whatever happened. So she just messaged me there saying like she heard literally, she woke up and heard
Mm.
someone coming up the stairs
All
and
right.
sure it was no one and all this kind of
Mm-hmm.
crack. Whereas like none of that ever happened before. So no, I've never experienced the UFO thing in Ireland, but there was one night here we were driving back from Florida. It sounds really like, mysticky and romantic and
Yeah.
all. It wasn't. We were super delayed because it was like a mad heavy rainstorm. So we were driving like long into the night. I had my mother-in-law like asleep in the back of the car.
All right. It's a
Um
long drive. Is it Florida to Texas?
yeah, I can't remember. It was like 12 hours or something. We did it in a
Okay.
day, but like it was a
Okay.
long, long
Right.
day. Um, and this because we ended up delayed and all. So we're driving through and there was a lot of construction going on, and we were right on the border of Louisiana coming back into Texas.
Cool.
So it was like it felt really like middle of nowhere,
Hmm.
whatever. I'm listening to whatever podcast, just trying to stay awake. And Dulce is beside me, also awake. Neither of us are talking. And I just like look for whatever reason, look like to the top right of the windshield, and I'm just looking at this like weird light, and it's just kind of moving like
Mm.
slowly but like steadily or whatever. And I'm like, that's probably a satellite. And then all of a sudden it just takes like a hard right and
Oh,
like
nice.
90-degree like shoots off.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And I was
Mm.
like, I just looked at Dulce, I was like, you saw that, right?
Mm.
And she was like, yeah. And that's it.
And you
You
don't
know
have
what
any
I mean?
idea what it could be? Like,
Haven't a clue, but
was it high enough to be like, could it have potentially been some kind of drone with like cool lights on it or something? Maybe.
I think like from what I remember, it was like it looked like a star, you know what I mean? Like
Oh,
that's
yeah.
how
Okay.
high
Like
up it
that.
was.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like so I referenced it not long ago in something I was writing, because both of us were just randomly drawn to this
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
And that's what kind of has captivated me is like, but why did we look at it? And like super boring, you know what I mean? Like just
Yeah.
kind of trail through and then, but it was the fact that it just shot off into nothingness
Then,
that
well,
was like, oh, that was weird. Like, you know what I mean?
yeah, the harsh turn on it and all that. So how have you found what are the main differences for you now being an Irishman living in Texas? Because we actually have a lot of listeners in Texas, so I'm sure they'll be kind of curious to hear your opinion on the differences. Because from what I can gather, actually, I think Texas, there's probably a lot of similarities to Ireland in terms of the people and how they are. But what's your observations?
Yeah, so I mean, for me personally, I'm an oddball. Like, I'm not gonna lie, like I genuinely am like just kind of a weirder person. So
Well,
like
we're
I
here talking about aliens and monsters, so
exactly, yeah.
yeah.
No, so I'll kind of like sit back and observe
Yeah.
more so
Yeah, yeah,
a lot.
same. Yeah,
And
likewise.
one of the hardest things for me to get used to was the fact that like cowboy culture is real. And
Oh, right, yeah.
like I was telling you earlier, like I do live like in the suburbs just outside the city.
Hmm.
And it kind of like so I live in a big like Hispanic area and all.
Are you near Houston
And
or
Houston, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
you're near Houston. Okay, cool.
Yeah, yeah. No, so like yeah, my address is Houston, you know what I mean?
Right, okay.
But yeah, I think that was kind of the biggest thing. Like there's a good saying, it's like all hat and no cattle.
Oh, right. It's all talk
And
basically and no
yeah,
actions
that's it.
kind of
Like,
thing. Or
a fella might get out of like a big raised truck in
Mhm.
his cowboy boots and like, the hat and the tie and all that, but he's never seen like a blade of grass in his life. Like, you know what I mean?
He's like the
So,
plastic paddy of cowboys, basically,
right,
right?
right, right. So that for me was like, because I'm just in my head, I'm like, but you're fake then. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Like,
Oh yeah.
uh,
It's all
so
show,
no,
right? It's all bluster, like it's all that kind of
yeah,
thing. But I'm sure
a
then
lot of
there's a
that.
lot of gnarly cowboys over there too, right? Like that are legit.
So this is it. Yeah, when you actually meet someone who has like, say, my father-in-law actually grew up on a ranch in
Right,
Mexico,
cool, cool.
and the stories, man, that comes out of that. But in terms of like just adjusting, it's taken me 4 years. Now I own my own cowboy boots, and I'm very
Oh,
proud
nice.
of
Nice.
that.
Are you
So
listening
now
to Garrett Brooks?
I'm
I hope not.
the country thing still doesn't stand with me. I'll listen to some
No.
of the old outlaw country, but
Same. Same. Marty Robbins and
yeah,
shit. Follow New Vegas
right,
on
right.
track. Basically.
uh, but no, so yeah, like in terms of just assimilating, that was actually like quite tough. But now I've learned to like embrace it. And my favorite is when I go just a little bit outside Houston and you see like the real like Texas, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
all of a sudden you're kind of transported back in time,
Yeah, I'd say
and
so.
it's like you see what it once was, and
Uh-huh.
like then you kind of understand like, oh, that's why they're so fucking proud.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like
Very
for
culturally isolated is probably the wrong word, but like they're right at the border with Mexico, right?
yeah.
And so they had to have their own identity, I suppose, that was kind of separate to the Mexican stuff, but also it's probably quite related, like you were saying about your father-in-law being like a sort of a cowboy himself. But it's very distinctly different, it seems like, to the rest of America, at least from an outside perspective. You're like, oh, yeah, this seems fairly different.
Yeah, no, it definitely. And so this isn't a plug, but because I was doing an interview for my new show, we
Yeah.
got to go out to this town called Navasota.
Hmm.
And it's like it's really not far out. Like, I think
Hmm.
it's like less than an hour. And it was like literally you took a turn off the main highway and it
Hmm.
was like here's these
Yeah,
like
yeah.
actual ranches. They've got the big gates, the don't tread on me, like
Oh,
snake
yeah,
flags.
yeah, the rattlesnake and all that shit. Is it
Yeah,
rattlesnake? It is,
yeah,
right?
yeah. And I'm like, okay, like these guys are the real deal. Like, I'm not driving up to this house to ask for directions or
No,
like,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
but then you get into the actual town and they have these like really cool I guess like 1920s, like they to me they're mansions. Like, a lot of them still have like the workers' stairs and stuff like that in it.
Yeah, yeah.
And a lot of that you just don't see near the city. And so like this was only last month. And it was like for me, it was a really eye-opening experience. We pulled over into the like little gas station in the at the crossroads of the town.
Hmm.
And I was like, I had to use a restroom anyway, but
Hmm.
as well, I was like, this will kind of get a little feel for the place and whatever. And I walked in, it was just these two huge dudes, two black guys, older dudes,
Hmm.
completely donning all the cowboy gear.
Oh,
And as soon
class.
as I walk in, yeah, I walk in like I was dressed up nicely in fairness for the
Uh,
day. So I had like my bolo tie and my
oh,
boots on.
deadly.
I didn't
Cool.
have my hat on. Yeah, yeah. But I walk in like long hair, whatever, and they just turn around just like, howdy. And
All
then that
right,
was it.
nice.
It's like, all right, cool, lovely. You know what I mean?
Deadly. Where are
Yeah.
you from in Dublin originally?
Uh, I'm from,
You're definitely a
I'm
fucking
gonna
dub with
say,
that accent anyway. Huh?
I'm glad I usually have my customer service voice on. I was like,
All
how can
right.
I help you today, sir?
Yeah.
Uh, um, hang on, I've a garbage truck backing up outside.
I can't really hear it, so I
Beeping.
think you're all right.
Okay, sound,
Mhm.
sound. Yeah, so I'm from on the envelopes it says Killiney, but really it's like Ballybrack, Killiney.
Okay,
So
right.
near Dunleary, like
Oh yeah, okay, they're done very
yeah,
cool. Me,
all the
me,
way like
me, me and Evan are heading up to a games convention up there soon. Dunleary's a lovely spot
happy
though.
days.
Yeah, yeah, Dunleary's class. It's a nice, nice place. Seaside place for our listeners that don't know where the fuck Dunleary is. Really nice, cool little spot. So yeah, you have the podcast. The podcast I suppose we're talking on now is the Weekly Creep, right?
Yeah.
And you're starting a separate sort of your own kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, what's the crack with it?
So you're gonna have to stop me if I talk too much because I have an awful fucking
Oh no,
problem
you're
of
grand,
doing this.
man. No,
But
no, you're grand. You're grand.
yeah, so it's called Houston Strange. It's
Mm.
just a play on words because the Houston Strong is like,
Oh, okay,
can't
cool.
can't keep Houston down kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which in fairness, again, is something that I am learning. Like I've been here when it's been like flooded out, no power or whatever. Like, you know what I mean?
Oh
When
yeah,
people are
yeah,
out,
right. Was that
just
big
like
freeze in Houston? Was that Houston?
yeah,
Was it? Were you
yeah,
there for that? Or was that before you
yeah.
were? Yeah.
It was a
Because that was
shambles.
crazy, right?
Do you know what it is? The infrastructure here, and this is talking as an electrician,
Yeah.
is really embarrassing because like someone coughs and the fucking power goes out. Do you know what I mean? For a week.
Yeah. I've
Uh,
heard that
but
about it. All right.
yeah, I think this year we're going on the national grid. Anyway,
Cool.
um, but yeah, so Houston itself, I was like, kind of like what I was saying, I was kind of on the outside of it, like looking in, kind of going, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that. And so then kind of some stuff happened at the start of the year, and I was like, do you know what? I've been here 4 years at that point. I am the one that needs to actually make an effort here. Do you know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
try and become like probably I'm making too much of a big deal out of it, but like just try and insert myself into it so as when I come away from it, I can go, oh, when I lived in Houston, like I did this really cool thing and it was like a
Mm-hmm.
lovely experience. And actually, part of it has come out of meeting a bunch of Irish lads.
All right.
Uh,
Always does.
Ironically enough, yeah. Um, but yeah, so I was like, let me hunt out some stories and just try and put myself in awkward situations and use whatever little knowledge I've picked up from doing
Uh,
the podcast to kind of put something together. And yeah, so there was a story up in it'll be the first series of the podcast
mm,
in Crosby, Texas, is maybe 35 minutes away from my house or an hour. And it is still technically Houston,
right.
but the whole neighborhood is built on graves.
Oh Lord.
So it's one of these classic stories where and I won't get too deep into it, but
Uh-huh.
basically the legend is there was a bunch of emancipated slaves were given
Mm,
a plot of land and then they lived there for a few years, got a school going, all that kind of stuff. And of course they had a cemetery just up the road. But all that one night there was a big fire.
mm,
No reason for it other than big fire happened.
mm,
And the place got wiped out, and all the people that survived, which could have been everybody or nobody,
mm.
they just moved like I think 2 miles down the road to a place called Barrett Station, which today is still there. Like
All right, cool.
it's yeah, and it's known as a proudly like black area. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And they can literally trace the roots of the town back to one dude
Oh,
who was an
nice.
emancipated slave who then, when he got his freedom, he spent his life hunting down his family
Cool. There's a
and
movie in
bringing
the
them back
making
from
there,
Barrett.
right?
Ah, man, I'm telling you now. So, like, the real story of this place is
Mm-hmm.
actually, in my opinion, better than the legend. But uh, so the story goes anyway. The cemetery was like that was unaffected by the fire, and just throughout the years, people were attending graves, but there weren't like headstones there. It was just like wooden,
Mm,
memorials or like carvings on trees, this kind of
mm-hmm.
thing. And it became known as Black Hope, right?
Right.
I think that the town was supposed to be known as Black Hope. Anyway, throughout like different, like basically clerical errors and different mapping, zoning issues and stuff like that, the cemetery was just kind of forgotten about because it was never really official. Like it was never registered with Harris County. And so then in like the 60s, this company called the Purcell Construction Company came along and they were like, this is a lovely plot of land. Let's
Mm.
build a load of fucking houses here.
Yeah, yeah.
And they did. And supposedly they knew like they were finding bodies, but I mean, you'll remember in Dublin in what was it, the late 90s when they were building what's the name of the place? Remember they found all the Viking remains
Yeah.
and stuff.
That happens
And
that happens all around Ireland. I think it even happened in Wexford somewhere where, yeah, around that time they would have been digging up the old roads, right? Because I think in Ireland it used to be like cobble and then they put something on top of the cobble and then the tarmac element would go on top of it or whatever. And so a lot of these roads have been dug up for the first time, in the 90s,
Yeah.
after they'd been laid. Like, and a lot of the time in Ireland, we were just kind of doing piecemeals and filling in a pothole and stuff. So whenever there was big reconstruction work going on, or they're trying to change the layouts of things, yeah, Viking burial stuff used to turn up all the time, right?
Yeah. But the biggest thing was like from a money perspective and a
Hmm.
construction point of view was,
Hmm.
well, now this project is halted.
Yeah, yeah.
So like
The
I have
archaeologists are
personally
coming in.
spoken. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I've actually spoken to like some of the older boys who would have worked on projects similar to that,
Hmm.
where they'll have found something, they report it to the foreman, and it's just like shut your mouth,
Yeah,
keep
yeah.
going,
Keep
like don't
going with it.
say
Like,
anything.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of the what they said happened with Black Hope.
Hmm.
And anyway, all these houses were built in the 80s. This family were like, shit's going on here. This is weird. And they went to dig a pool out in their back garden, came across two bodies.
Hmm.
And that one particular couple ended up being on Unsolved Mysteries. They were on
Oh,
Oprah. They
cool.
tried to
Right.
sue the construction company. So that's where the legend came into reality.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And it's very traceable to that point.
Hmm.
So anyway, the neighborhood's been expanded on like countless times throughout the years, and it's huge now. Very Texan, very much like if you're not a resident of this neighborhood, you
Hmm.
shouldn't be here.
Oh,
To the
okay.
point where me and Dulce went up just to check it out, like, and we were walking around the park, and there was literally signs saying, "If you don't live here, you can get fined 10 grand just for being in the park."
Oh, shit.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
crazy.
So
That's actually insane.
yeah, but part of that now, I think, is because of all these ghost hunters flocking to the area who are
Ah.
trying to be the ones to solve Black Hope.
So this happens.
Anyway,
So this happens. So, um, and it could be advice to yourself, potentially based on whatever way you tackle it. I mean, obviously people know about black hole, it's not a secret. But sometimes things happen where you find a new area where people might come out and they might say, yeah, we're experiencing something here, and you might turn up, and next thing you know, you have a full street or like an avenue, and they're all saying, "Yep, this has happened. I can back up what they're saying. We've had something similar, blah blah blah." And this might be the first time this has happened. And then next thing, if you're the one to break the story, sometimes like you have to be responsible doing it, not you in particular, but
yeah, yeah,
you have to be kind of responsible in how you attack it, because it's like, oh shit, like next thing you know, you have millions of podcasters, ghost hunters, lads like us going up, checking it out, and taking pictures and stuff. So, and because I suppose nowadays everyone's looking for that next thing, right? And it's like, it's crazy. But in America, I feel like there's a lot of unexplored stuff like that, especially with all those burial grounds and stuff. I mean, was it it's Graham Hancock, so I don't know whether I should take it with a pinch of salt or something. I think it was him that said it, but isn't there like fully like there's like Native American cities, First Nation cities, where they're just recently kind of uncovering them basically, like, and they're like, oh shit, we didn't have any idea that any of this was here, do you know?
I mean, personally, that's not something that I can attest to
Yeah,
because I just don't know enough about it. But
yeah,
I think it's interesting because there'll be like full on burial mounds.
mm-hmm.
Like same like in Ireland, the way like there's like passage
Cairns
tombs
and
like
Passage Stones,
littering
yeah.
the mountains and stuff. But like, yeah, you could be like in a neighborhood here, and again, I haven't seen any of this. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's more stuff that I've like read. But yeah, like it'll be, oh, in that corner is like a protected burial mound.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, if there's something buried there, or someone buried there, or multiple people buried there, is because there was, a town or a village or whatever nearby, most likely. So like it's only now that we're being respectful of these things
Yeah,
that people are kind of going, oh shit, like,
yeah, yeah. Like,
this has been here the whole time. Like,
yeah, yeah, because happens over here. I mean, sure, look at all the what was it, the what's the name of that place with all the babies?
yeah,
The
out in Galway.
Yeah, was it Tuam? Tuam, was it?
Yeah, I think it might have been actually. Yeah,
Tuam.
yeah, to him. Yeah.
Yeah, like all of them. Like, so basically, for our listeners that don't know, is like they only, I suppose, I don't know how recent it was, but they found that basically, the church had been burying fetuses and stuff like that. kind of just without any registration, without anyone really knowing what was going
It was a
on.
mass grave,
Mass
yeah.
grave, yeah, yeah, yeah. Which is just so sad and tragic as well. You're like, one, chances are those babies that would have been taken, I'm sure there was a percentage that was like, oh yeah, these are, like they were given to the nuns or whoever was doing it. I can't remember who
Yeah,
actually.
in
I think it
good
was
faith.
nuns,
Like,
wasn't it? Yeah, some
I
of it
think
was
so, yeah.
probably in good faith. Some of it was probably like, I can't handle this child, and then some would have been taken without anyone's consent at all. And Lord knows, like it's so dark and fucking scary, and you're like,
Yeah.
when shit like that's going on, like all of that kind of stuff, there's no wonder that there's a bit of folklore and there's these stories attached to things, and there's no wonder like we've encountered it a lot too with like hauntings and stuff. A lot of the time when you go really far back to like kind of the older tales, like banshees and all this kind of type of stuff, it almost seems like these are like cautionary tales to kind of stop people from acting the
Oh yeah.
bollocks. Do you know what I mean? It's like if
That's
you
it.
do
Yeah,
something
yeah.
really wrong, like this is going to come back to haunt you. Like you're going to be avenged, like or they're going to want vengeance. They're going to come after you. Um, and yeah, it kind of seems like sometimes we've kind of drawn that conclusion just looking at stories. You're like, that it does kind of seem like it's kind of just cautionary, trying to stop people from being shitheads,
Yeah. So I mean, like that was the thing for me with Black Hope when I
Mhm,
like because I had done the research
mhm.
before for an episode of Weekly Creep, but then when I like actually kind of did a real deep dive, I like now I have like the city map or the county map from like back in the day,
Class,
and I
man.
was able
Cool.
to chase, yeah, and I was able to trace back like the name on the plantation that was supposedly the guys who owned these slaves in the
Hmm.
first place, and like that plantation wasn't there.
Oh,
You know what I
right.
mean? But the family name was strong throughout the years in headlines in that area,
Mm-hmm.
where basically they were just not a very nice family. And I've reached out to one of their grandsons now
Hmm.
because I'm like, not
Yeah,
to be like, how dare you, but
yeah,
I
yeah.
wanted his side of
Get
the
his
story.
take. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and because this guy has been involved in like trying to reclaim the family name, he like
Hmm.
has put his own money into restoring headstones and stuff.
Oh, cool.
Um, yeah, but ultimately, I'm not going to say I debunked it, but I found where the legend kind of grew and where maybe the truth was actually based out of that one town that still exists,
Hmm.
Barrett Station. And but the thing that I did come across, or that I kind of figured out, was on the county map, it had like people's actual farms and ranches like mapped out or
Hmm.
whatever. And back in the day, you were told like bury your family in your land.
Yeah.
Now they say that it's illegal here. I don't know how true this is. Talking
Mm.
about conspiracy stuff, I had a
Right.
friend tell me, this older boy that I used to work with, he was like, "What you got to do is you got to go out there and you got to bury one of your family members in your backyard.
It's
And
got
if you
accent.
bury, it is literally how he spoke. But he was like, and I'm not even joking. He was saying like, say if you're, God forbid, touch wood, but if one of your like older family members dies, he's like, you got to bury him in your backyard.
Uh,
If you are in your backyard and if you bury him out there, you don't have to pay taxes no more.
okay. That makes
So,
sense.
yeah, I don't know where the truth comes into that in modern times, but back in the day, it was just a thing that you did. You just buried your family in your land. It was done in the big houses in England and Ireland as well. But there would have been generations living on these farms
Hmm.
together, and like it was going back to the 1800s and stuff like that. So like people died, people were just dying left, right, and center
Oh, yeah,
anyway.
yeah, yeah.
So I think now that these are the bodies that are being dug up
Hmm.
in this cemetery, like you know what I mean. And at the end of the day, regardless of whose bodies they are, how they ended up there, the people that I've spoken to are now actively living in haunted houses, whether it's because of that or not.
Yeah,
I don't fucking know. I'm not trying to make any connection, but I'm just getting like their story to see. And it's been really fun. Like I had a phone call from kind of the main guy that I've been interviewing the other day, and he was just saying like because we are mates now. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
And like that ultimately was the goal of this. And he was telling me he had like some paranormal group over, and it was just a shit show
yeah.
basically. And they did nothing, and kind of nothing came out of it. Whereas for me, I'm just like I just went out to sit down. Like I know the family now, I know the kids,
Chat. Just
so
yeah.
just yeah, just being involved with like Houston and stuff like that. Anyway, so that's my fucking long-winded answer for yeah, Houston Strange is the podcast anyway, and I'm hoping to do kind of more like smaller community events like now as well. Like on
Um,
November 1st, I
yeah,
think I'll be doing a thing at a local brewery, just literally sitting down and getting
class
those
man.
stories. Hopefully,
Cool, cool.
yeah, could be a bit of crack.
When are you dropping, or have you dropped an episode yet?
October 17th,
Okay, cool.
first
So
episode will be
so
out,
by
and
the
then it'll be
time
every couple of weeks. Like,
cool, so by the time it's on, by the time this episode is on my feed, at least on the Monsterfuls feed, it should be live. So go and check it out, and give it a listen as well. That'd be cool. Because yeah, man, like
yeah,
that kind of boots on the ground shit. Like Tim does that from Strange Familiars a lot, and I kind of, in a sense, I'm kind of jealous because like it does exist in Ireland, but I find like it's fewer and far between. We have a very small population. I mean, what's the population of Texas? It's like
I think Houston has more people in it than
Ireland.
Ireland.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah, for
think
sure.
I might be wrong, but
No, I think
yeah,
you're right. Like, I think New
yeah,
Jersey even has more population than Ireland. Like, I
yeah,
think so. And New Jersey would be a lot smaller than Texas. Like, because I just have a buddy in
yeah,
New
yeah,
Jersey, and I think I've stacked them all, or maybe about the same size, maybe. But
yeah.
yeah, and again, I think it's something that listeners don't really realize how small Ireland actually is. You're like, no, no, no. Like, it's literally so small compared to America. Like, it's insane.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
one of the first times I brought Dulce over
yeah,
for it was like Christmas time or something, and I was only living there temporarily, so I was borrowing me granny's car,
uh-huh,
and we woke up early one morning, and I was like, "Oh, here, granny, I'm gonna have the car today." Like, made sure
uh-huh.
she was like looked after or whatever, and she was like, "Where are you going?" I was like, "Oh, we're just driving down to the Cliffs of Moher."
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that morning we touched the water on the East Coast, drove to the West Coast, had an
Yeah,
ice
yeah.
cream, and then came all the way back. And it was like, oh, nice
Sure,
day out. Like,
Irish people are lazy that way because we don't. It's all relative, right? So you grow up and it's an ordeal to have to drive 40 minutes, whereas in America that's a commute. You know what I mean? It's and not only is it a
yeah,
commute, it's probably a
yeah,
commute that a lot of people do. And for us, 40 minutes, especially I find people from Dublin are like, I'm not fucking going far at all. Like if it's not on me like public transport route or it's not anything like that, then it's miles away. Like only
yeah,
recently did I sort of change my fucking thinking on driving in Ireland because I'm like, it's not far to drive 3.5 hours to go and see something cool, right?
this
But
is it.
most Irish people that you actually talk to are like, oh no, you're going miles away. Like if I told someone tomorrow, I'm just driving down to Kerry to do something, just have to do something, to be like, fucking Kerry? Like, Jesus, you staying the night? It's like, no,
Yeah,
it's all good. Like, do you know what I mean? I'll get up and get back. But no, it is, I'd say the thing I'd love to check out in America is that the open roads, the driving.
yeah.
Some of the folklore as well is really cool over there because you have a lot of the First Nations kind of stuff. Um, I suppose in Texas, right? It's obviously there was tribes there, right? Do you have any idea of the situation over there now with that kind of thing with the First Nations? Like, is there any reservations in Texas? I don't even fucking know, to be honest. I'd imagine
I'm
so,
good.
right?
Yeah. So when I lived in Canada, there would be parts of like because the job that I had, I would drive from Toronto to Montreal quite
Yeah.
a bit, like just because we had a shop out there that I was like do steel maintenance and stuff like.
Uh-huh.
And there would be like sections of the highway and sections of land that would be I can't remember the name of the tribe, but it was like some First Nations land
Mm.
that you would drive through and like certain rules were different and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. Um, Down here, I'm not going to say that there isn't, but I've been kind of limited in the sense, like talk about like being afraid to drive far. So I've driven to like Florida. Obviously, that was just a once off. For the most part, though, we just kind of bounced between Houston, Austin, San Antonio, and Dallas. So we're in this kind of
Cool.
square where it's like few hours to here, few hours to there. Like actually, this weekend I'll be driving up to Austin for that. I'm doing photos for an event,
Cool.
and like I was kind of him and hawing, like, oh, will I get a hotel? It
Mm.
ends late, but like at the end of the day, I'm just gonna drive back because it's like 2.5, 3 hours, and it's grand. Like, do you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
no,
I
that's
love
fine.
driving, and I always have. But, um, like my wife considers herself, well, because she is like an
Mm.
indigenous, like
Okay,
you know what I mean.
cool.
She
Yeah.
would be Native American because she's Native Mexican. Like she can,
Right. Yeah, yeah.
um, trace herself, her family back, like to her dad's from just over the border, but her ma's from further south, like
Mm-hmm.
in a much smaller uh area, like you know what I mean. And funnily enough, the last time we were back for a funeral, and we went to there's a pub called Baker's Corner. I don't know, like if it's a big like junction that people would
Right.
know in Dublin, like. But anyway, beside Baker's there was a taco truck,
Oh yeah.
and I think my little sister had wanted to try it, but she was didn't want to go. 'Cause she didn't know what to ask for or whatever
Yeah.
because it was specifically like birria tacos. And
Okay.
so anyway, we're like, fuck it, like let's go check it out. You know what I mean?
Uh,
And my wife is a bit shy, and I was doing the like ask them where they're from. Do you know what I mean? Because I was like,
yeah.
maybe they're Spanish or something like I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Lads could be Portuguese fucking taking the piss, like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, do
Wearing a
you know what I mean?
sombrero,
Like,
they're from Portugal.
yeah, yeah. But it turns out they're actually from the same state
Oh, no
that
way.
her mom was from.
Class.
Yeah, and so yeah, that was a funny little coincidence. But yeah, no, so uh, Dulce takes her heritage pretty
Yeah.
seriously. Like I would say,
You
like
kind of have
she,
to, I think, when you have
yeah,
the
because
heritage such as hers, especially when you're living in America, right? Because it's an identity. I think that's I again fly on the wall kind of observation of Americans is like
yeah,
people, and it's human nature, right? Is that they like to kind of cling to the heritage in a good way, I think, actually.
yeah,
Sometimes people might say, oh, whatever, let it go. But it's different. It's definitely different because my dad is English, but I don't really claim England as such. So
right,
it's
right.
different. But I feel like if I was maybe born and raised in America in the same circumstances, I probably would claim England a bit more. And I think maybe it's because America's a bit more recent or something that way. I don't know. It's funny.
Do you know, like, so from what and I might be speaking out of pocket, but I think for a lot of these places around here, especially newer, like
Uh,
say, like Houston is just like sprawling, and it's just like these little strip malls after strip mall and gas station after
yeah,
gas. Like literally, we have outside my neighborhood on each corner is a huge big petrol station now,
yeah,
and like they're literally just facing one another,
yeah.
going like ours is 10 cents cheaper today or whatever.
Yeah,
But I think a lot of people they're so void of culture that it's something that they're actually craving. And they,
yeah,
they
yeah.
might not realize it, you know what I mean? They might not realize that, but that's why then say specifically like a lot of the Mexican people that
Hmm.
I've known
Hmm.
are like overly proud of it to the point where it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
all right, pal, like I get
yeah,
it,
yeah.
chill the fuck out.
Hmm.
But it's because there's such a fucking
Void.
need for it. Yeah.
Yeah,
That they're like trying to make up for it. And I think as well, like Irish Americans and stuff like that, you'll see, you
yeah,
know what I
yeah.
mean?
Like in
Like,
Boston and all that.
yeah, it can be from the outside, it can be a bit over the top, but they're like that. They're just trying to cling on to
Yeah, I think it's
something
cool.
because
Like,
otherwise you're just
yeah,
an anonymous being,
yeah.
like, you know what I mean? And that can
No, I
be a
think
bit
it's
scary.
cool, and it's what you remember as well as what you grow up with. I have good friends in on the East Coast in America who have Irish heritage, like Irish in that basically all of their grandparents are Irish, right? So like
Right, right.
essentially they're Irish, really, to all intents and
Yeah.
purposes, genetically. But I do say it to them a lot of the time.
Genetically, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. When I'm talking to them, I'm like, sometimes he'll talk about behaviors that his ma does or maybe things that he does, and I'm like, that's because you're fucking Irish, man. You just don't know it. Like that's Irish shit that you're doing right there. Do you know what I mean? I'm
That's
like,
generational
it
trauma there,
is. It's
pal.
just,
Like,
that's
yeah.
that generational trauma that you're carrying with you, brother. But it is. It's that it is important. I do think it is important to a degree for sure. I've noticed with your podcast actually, the Weekly Creep, you used to do a bit of true crime. Did you ever do Eliza Lamb?
Eliza Lamb. Is that
That's
the girl from that was in the hotel in
Yeah, yeah,
California?
yeah, 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 yeah. The
Do
Cecil
you
or
know
Cecil
what?
Hotel, whatever way you say it, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. This is gonna be like we actually don't even have that many episodes, but like Dulce did a few of them as well at the beginning before like basically work took over. Uh, we might have done it, but I
Mm,
did read an interesting article. Well, article, some
mm.
probably a fucking meme to be honest,
Yeah.
but recently enough, anyway, that one of the cops from the case came forward and said like, "Oh, I was the one who closed the lid on the thing."
Oh,
When I
okay.
first got there, but I didn't think it was important at the time, so I never wrote it into any reports, and that's why it was never. Now, was this just
Mm,
the police department being like, "We need a fucking out here because people
yeah.
are harassing us over this story," and it was kind of what gave it more mystery was the fact that they were like, sorry, I'm just rubbing my tit here.
Nice. Well, there's video, so if people want
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
go
yeah.
over and check it out.
Trying to stretch out here. But
For
uh,
our listeners as well, by the way,
Jesus.
that aren't familiar with the Eliza Lamb case, basically,
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Eliza Lamb was she was I think she was young as well when it happened, but
In her
basically
20s, I think, yeah.
yeah, she was in her 20s and she stayed at this hotel. I think it was the Cecil Hotel, was the name of it,
Hmm.
which we did an episode about. It actually has a lot of folklore attached to it itself, a lot of kind of weirdness, and basically she went viral in the early days of the internet. I want to say it was probably like, I don't know, was it like 2009, maybe a bit after, something like that. But basically she was found on the CCTV. She went missing. She was found on the hotel CCTV after the fact, acting very erratically, going up and down in an elevator. People at the time were kind of speculating, like, oh, this looks like she's like running from someone or something like sinister going on. And then people were starting to say, is there something paranormal going on? There was all this kind of crazy stuff being thrown around. And then, like a couple of weeks later, maybe a week or two later, people started to report that like the water in the hotel was like coming out black and it tasted horrible and whatever, which is really gross. But it turned out that she was found dead in the water tanks above the hotel.
Hmm.
And so then a bunch of speculation came around, right? Where they were sort of saying, like, was there something sinister involved? Because basically the way it was framed was that it was very difficult for her. It would have been very difficult for her to get into that tank. It would have been difficult enough to get up onto the roof because the roof um was alarmed, right? As all these hotels
Right,
are.
right.
But there was a fire escape on the window side. But had she have went up the fire escape, they were saying it would have been very difficult to actually get inside the tank because there was no way to get up to it unless you had a ladder. And so then people were kind of saying, was there a member of staff involved? Like, was there, like, what was going
Right,
on?
right.
Or like, was it? And so there is, again, we like, it's funny because we do these guest podcasts and, the topics get thrown around and they're a little bit different to what you usually talk about. And we actually did have an episode many, many moons ago about elevators and lifts, right? About
Yeah,
that there's
yeah.
like something
The lift
paranormal.
game and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. Lift
Yeah,
game and
yeah.
all this paranormal stuff associated with them. And so we were trying to obviously tie that in, but when it's a real life kind of true crime kind of thing, you're like, sometimes it doesn't feel right to kind of do that. Um, but that case was interesting, where I think for me it was like, it definitely seemed as if like she was bipolar, diagnosed bipolar, and she was medicated for bipolar, medicated to the fucking tits, by the way. She was on like about 7 different tablets for bipolar, which I didn't think they medicated that to that extreme for. But
Yeah, yeah.
very little found in her system after she was dead. So like people were kind of saying she probably stopped taking her medication. But yeah, it was a curious one. I just, when I seen that you guys did true crime, I was like, I wonder has that come up or anything like that, where it's like there's a bit of paranormal perhaps attached to it, or
Yeah. Do you know what? Like, so we kind of steered away from it after a while because it, the word icky isn't right,
yeah,
but
yeah,
it's a word that's thrown around now a lot because people are like, it just doesn't feel right a lot of the time.
no,
Like,
yeah,
us reporting
yeah,
on these stories, and especially when it starts to get like too relatable
yeah, yeah.
and
As you
too
get
fucking
older,
like, exactly. Yeah.
when you
I
get
do
older,
definitely
you're
think
like, oh
like,
fuck, like this could be
yeah,
me, this could be
there's
a
a
family
family.
member. Yeah.
This is it. Like, but no, with that case in particular, because of, yeah, I do believe that the Cecil Hotel
Mhm.
probably is very haunted. Like, it's
Mhm.
not a very nice hotel.
No, no, shit,
Much
all by
like,
just
yeah, it's a lot like the one in New York as well. What, I can't think of the name of it. Something, the Chelsea Hotel, I think.
yeah, that sounds
It's a
familiar.
similar kind of vibe. Like, whereas it was like used for like people who weren't poor artists at
Yeah.
the time. It was like, this would be a nice little drug squat or whatever. We can
Mm-hmm.
get away for 2 weeks here. Um, so like there's a lot of emotion and just weirdness
Mm-hmm.
about the place as it is. And then something
Mm-hmm.
like this happens. Yeah, you are gonna have to kind of go like, okay, yeah, and this is me definitely getting out of my comfort zone. But
Uh,
she was bipolar. Was she having some sort of episode, or did that make her more inclined to actually see weird
yeah,
paranormal stuff? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not a fucking doctor, so
no, we've
I
we've
don't
thrown
know.
around
But
that idea before. Like that's we've definitely thrown around that idea before. It's tricky. It is tricky because I'll tell you why it's tricky because and we have definitely had listeners I think that have fallen into the category of having hallucinations. It's tricky because to sort of indulge that line of thinking, the super like or like the I'm seeing things line of thinking
yeah,
is like it's like the exact opposite of medicine for those people, right? Because you're basically from what I gather, this is armchair psychology. I don't know for sure. I've watched videos on YouTube of guys that have schizophrenia and stuff like that, guys and girls that suffer from
Yeah.
schizophrenia. And they basically say that like the way that they have to deal with that is to be basically like it's not real, like it's not like the no one else can see this kind of stuff, right? So as soon as you start, and we're kind of cognizant of it as well on the podcast sometimes, where it's like if you entertain that side of things too much and someone is inclined to think that way because of a mental illness rather than just sort of something bizarre happening, it can be tricky because like you're sometimes enabling what could
yeah,
potentially be a
that's what I was
harmful
gonna
line
say.
of
Yeah.
yeah, a harmful line of thinking. But we actually did discuss this with Brother Richard, who's yeah, a Capuchin monk. And we were asking him because this was something that came up a lot for us over the years doing these types of things was where do you draw the line with something paranormal happening versus someone suffering from mental illness? Um and he did say actually even the priests and stuff, because you know, usually in exorcisms and stuff they'll get priests involved, that they do actually have a fairly stringent sort of protocol for ensuring that it isn't a mental health thing, which is kind of reassuring.
Yeah, and I mean, like, so I told Tim from Strange Familiars this, like, I was very anti-church. I mean, I'm still like
Yeah, yeah.
not
I think
fucking
we're in
any sort of
Ireland. Yeah,
religion,
yeah, yeah. Like, look,
but it's
I
just how we are. Like, yeah,
well, I
with
went to
all
the
the stuff that
school. The
comes
school
out,
I
like,
went to was basically literally at the center of the Catholic abuse scandal. As a matter of
Jesus,
fact,
yeah,
it was one of the first. It was definitely one of the first shots from the gun about
right,
that whole thing, and the school that I went to, basically one of the most prolific um sort of perpetrators of all of that fucked up shit was in my school. And he actually ended up we're on YouTube, so he ended up deleting himself, shall we say, once the
right,
accusations were
right.
brought to a fore. And yeah, so growing up, I was in that environment and I had such a resentment because I was actually raised basically atheist. I wouldn't say atheist. I was raised probably just open-minded, I suppose would be probably the right way. Whatever you think,
Yeah.
go with. That's kind of how I was raised. Like I didn't make my communion, didn't make my confirmation, and that would be
Okay,
quite
okay.
unusual for just a non
Yeah,
it's not like I'm a lot of people that didn't do that were Protestant, right? But for me, it was just that was the way I was raised. And
yeah,
so,
and
yeah,
oh no, no, like I did make mine, and I can tell you now it was purely because
yeah,
it was a money grab.
yeah,
Like,
it's ritualistic kind of thing that everyone went
yeah,
along with, right? But so
yeah,
to be in that, yeah, you couldn't help but resent the institution that is the Catholic Church in Ireland.
yeah,
If you unless you wanted to put on your blinkers and kind of say like, oh, I never happened to me, I don't know anyone that it happened to, so it didn't happen or something, whatever. Like
yeah,
you do you, but personally, like I would have went to school at a time where the last people that boarded in my school, like my school was part of the border school as well. Like they would have only, I think it only stopped boarding maybe 5 or 10 years before I got there, and that would have been a lot of
right, right.
yeah, yeah. But it did. You know, we're talking about ick. That school had the ick for me. Like I fucking hated
Yeah,
the place. Jesus Christ, I fucking hated the place.
but and like even in the sense, like say, like my ma had me when she was 17, so
Mm.
like that was very much at the time when we could have been one of those families dealing with
Yeah.
the nuns, like what we were
Yeah.
talking
Yeah.
about earlier.
Absolutely, man. Yeah.
But I only bring it up to say, like, me 2 years ago, even
Mm.
never would have even entertained the
Yeah.
thoughts of listening to an interview with Brother Richard. But
Yeah. Yeah.
I did listen to Tim's one with him, one of them, and it was very like, I guess the word like settling. Like when he went into like, no, we genuinely do approach this like with a more of a medical and a psychological
Yeah.
approach before we jump straight to like the devil is in her.
Yeah.
And it kind of made me feel a lot better about the whole thing. I'm not saying that there's not people out there,
No.
especially
No.
over here,
Yeah.
that do like jump straight to that. But I had read a book, one of these, I don't know, it's on the shelf somewhere. It
Mm.
was like, so we've kind of fallen into like poltergeist cases is kind of like just our bread and butter. And I love reading them because I love being able to like just tick the box and kind of go, oh, just like here or just like
Yeah.
there.
Mm-hmm.
And I read one and it was very good. I don't think we made an episode out of it or anything like that because I do just like to
Read up
read them
on
on the
stuff.
side. And
Yeah.
sometimes the story's just not really there. It's just
Yeah.
like
That
a
happens
case study
too.
and that's it.
Yeah.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
but then the same fella who I had like respected his approach throughout the first book that I read, he was actually dealing with a case, an ongoing case, very near where I'm from in
Oh,
Dublin. And I was
okay.
like,
Cool.
oh my God, fantastic. Like, let me
Mm-hmm.
get this. It'd be great just to be able to have a reference and be
Mm-hmm.
able to say, that's just down the road from here. I didn't even make it like a few pages in, and I was like, oh no, this woman needs help.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And this was a prime example of this guy was
Yeah.
not
Yeah. A
helping.
charlatan.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't even know that he was a charlatan. I think he was doing his best from his experience, but
True. Okay. Yeah.
realistically though, that's not what she needs. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then like so another case that I was reading just the other night, and I'd never heard of it, and I can't think I don't have I closed out the tabs and all earlier,
Mm-hmm.
but it was a horrific case of this foster child
Mm-hmm.
who had gone to this family and ended up being abused with the family. The family didn't believe her, all this stuff. And of course, throughout this time, all this poltergeist activity starts acting up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So she ends up getting in touch with a fella called Billy Roll, right? I don't know if you ever come
Sound.
across it.
Shout out
Yeah,
Billy Roll. No, I don't know Billy. I know
yeah.
Jelly Roll, but I don't know Billy Roll.
So now this fella is his name is actually William like G Roll or something,
Right.
right?
Okay.
And
Right.
he's got like a lot of very good, well-researched books about cases that he's worked on throughout his life. He's don't even know if he's still alive at this point, but he's one of those kind of older paranormal investigators who really like took every little detail down. And
Class.
I was familiar with him because of like Guy Playfair or Colin Wilson, one of those guys referencing
Mm-hmm.
him before. And so anyway, like this guy was like legit or whatever, but he ended up kind of taking this young one in, getting her out of that situation, and still observing like the fact that yeah, this weird paranormal poltergeist activity was
Uh-huh.
still going on. But as her life progressed, he was still very heavily involved. His wife was also involved, and another researcher who they worked with. Oh, I'm giving you the thumbs up, apparently.
Yeah. Yeah. I see that. Yeah. I'm like, that's quite cool. I'm impressed. That's come up a couple of
I don't
times. I'm
even
like,
know
oh,
how
that's
it
nice.
like I don't know how it even happens. But her life unfortunately was just one tragedy after another.
Aye.
And like it kind of seemed like every time it was basically just a string of abusive relationships
Mm-hmm.
and horrific stuff to do with her children and all.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the woman is still alive. She's
Mm-hmm.
in prison now because of what had happened with her children. And
Mm-hmm.
I was just like, I was reading this story and like it had gone far beyond the paranormal elements. And like William Roll, in fairness, like he capped it. Like, you know what I mean? He wasn't
Mm-hmm.
trying to exploit her or anything like that. He had done his case study and then grown so attached to her and tried to help her so much. And unfortunately, he just couldn't. Um, because of the situations that she ended up in, basically like
Mm-hmm.
horrible, abusive men. But this is where this kind of boundary line is,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, you know what I mean? If you're uh involving yourself in someone's life so much, like
Mm-hmm.
it can get scary, and drawing that line is very, very hard. And I feel like now because this realm is so oversaturated with people who genuinely don't care. And
Yeah.
like me at 16, it's not that I didn't care, but I had no idea what a boundary was. Like, you know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah,
Or
yeah.
like even like later, like in my 20s, like you were saying, like the older you get, yeah, like you're kind of
More
going,
sensitive you get to it, like,
yeah, and
yeah.
like sometimes the cases are like they're not cases, they're real fucking people, like you
If I
know what I
was
mean?
20,
And
man,
that's
if I
where,
started a Master Fuzz when I was 20 or a true crime podcast when I was 20, I wouldn't have given a flying fuck about what I talked about now. And I'll be totally honest with you. I would have been just
yeah,
like, ah, yeah, whatever, guts hanging out and all. She was fucking, you know what I mean?
yeah,
I wouldn't give a shit. Like, and that was because I was a head ass. Do you know what I mean? So, like, it is one of those things where as you get older, you do kind of, well, it's not everyone, but you get a lot of a sensitivity. There was a point in time where I was like, Jesus, it might be worthwhile to do like sort of a paranormal true crime podcast basically, or just talk about cases that might have another layer of depth to them.
yeah,
And then I just kind of felt like at the time I was like, this is kind of, you're adding like a smoke screen onto true crime, onto crime that doesn't necessarily need it. Like, because, you know, if you're a family member, say that, you know, you listen to this podcast, you know, you Google your family member's name that died or whatever it happened, and then you listen to some idiot like me going like, oh, it was a ghost and all that, you know, and they probably actually know a lot more about the case than you do because you can only, like you or I can only read it and go, okay, this is what we've got online, you know, and
yeah,
so
yeah,
that was kind of what that's even with the Eliza Lamb one, like it was like when we did it, I was very careful about it because I was like, if this is um sometimes though real life mystery can be just as intriguing as the paranormal, but it's I suppose it's about how you present it, right? Because you don't want to be exploitative necessarily of
that's it, yeah,
other people's suffering. You know what I mean? Like it's a tricky kind of thing. I think some
yeah,
true crime, but some people love, like for example, last podcast on the left. I think they do true crime, but people actually enjoy that they make it lighthearted.
yeah. I
So
mean, like, look,
you know,
I have actually met all the boys from last
yeah, yeah,
podcast.
cool.
Not like in a professional setting or
No,
anything,
no,
like just me fucking following them around
sleepover.
town. But yeah, yeah. And I think they do great work, but you can even see them realizing
Yeah.
like
Well, they
this
got
isn't,
bigger, right? So the reach is so big
and that
now.
as well. Yeah, yeah.
That's a problem
But
too.
like, yeah, but like for me and for us in particular, like we've got 4 years of like weekly creep is us learning
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
each
True,
other. Like
yeah.
we were only just married,
But
you know
yeah.
what I mean, a few months before weekly creep and stuff like that. So you can, like I was saying earlier, like we got a shitty comment on our first video, and
Mm.
I wasn't hurt because I was like, yeah, that's shite. Like,
Yeah.
so why would you judge anyone on that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Because it's like this was us sitting down with one shite mic between
Mm-hmm.
us and telling a story, and it's like, but now 4 years later, it's like we've both, thankfully, because of Weekly Creep, realized that we actually enjoy a lot more of like writing a script for
Yeah,
an
yeah.
episode. And like,
Yeah, man.
look, maybe it's still shite at the end of the day, but that's where our kind of passion for it is. And so now, like, Weekly Creep 4 years later is definitely different to Weekly Creep four
Yeah.
years ago. And in the span of things, like, I have definitely been every trope of uh true crime fucking
Right.
podcast. You know what I mean? Like, I'll see memes now and I'm like, ah, that was definitely, you know what I mean? But
Yeah,
I
but
think like
that's
it
learning
like
though,
that's it. And I
you know.
feel like everybody is kind of learning together.
Yeah.
But I will say, um, so in Houston, right? Because I am still obsessed with true crime. I just
Mm-hmm.
tend to, I feel like I can't do it justice, really.
Mm, right. Okay.
Like if I was gonna do it, I would want it to be its own. Like if I was gonna do one case, it would be an entire series. You know
Yeah.
what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Like that kind of thing, just to
Mm-hmm.
justify it. But uh actually, I'll get back to the Houston thing.
Mm.
We started covering like just real life survival stories.
Yeah.
And man, I'm telling you, we did an episode on it was called the Tonga Castaways,
Yeah. All right.
right? Is like if you look that up, it's these young fellas who literally they were in a highly Christian boarding school
Class.
and
Okay.
they
Right.
were
Sounds.
sick of their school dinners,
Uh,
right? That's what they said.
uh,
And so they were like they were on the island of Tonga
Hmm.
which is like in the Pacific.
Yeah.
I think Fiji is the biggest island near to them.
Okay.
So they were like, "Fuck it, lads, let's go rob this boat." Do you know what I
Mm.
mean? There was fishermen on the island. They were
Hmm.
like, "This fisherman's a prick, so like we'll take his boat."
Nice.
And dude, like a year and a half later, they're still living on a deserted island, not a
Oh,
desert
class.
island. But yeah, and they'd like learned how to hunt. They'd learned how to make fire. There was like 4 or 5 kids, like, and they're
Yeah.
literally children. Like I think they were 15. And I was reading that, and I was like, this is mind blowing.
Yeah.
So we did like an episode on that. It's probably one of my favorite ones that we ever did. And it because it's all true, maybe a little bit embellished by the
Yeah.
lads who are like, you know
Yeah.
what I
Yeah.
mean? But they seem fairly honest, like talking about like being afraid to cry in front of one another because they're still
Mm.
like 14,
Boys
15
and
year old
yeah.
boys, like, you know what I mean, trying to be
Uh-huh.
men. But then another one we did like last year was The Alive, the story of
Yeah,
the
yeah. That's a
boys.
great story.
Yeah,
That's fucking nuts, man. That's
fantastic.
insane.
Yeah.
Like
And
that.
and by the end of it, I was literally sitting here recording with Dulce. She was like, all right, cool, like lovely little
Uh,
story. I was like getting choked up.
yeah,
Like,
man.
but and I'm not like an emotional person. I literally that last episode, I
Yeah.
think we took like 15 breaks. So I was like, oh, just going to get a drink of water. You know
Did
what I mean?
you catch
So
the movie that came out about that recently? The sort of new one, the
I
fucking the
actually
sequel.
haven't the sequel.
It's actually really good.
Alive again.
Yeah, Alive Again. It's actually really good. It just also just shows you like the guys that hiked out, like their journey was fucking insane. Like I go on hikes
Yeah.
often, and like that hike that they did with like improper equipment was just like it's nuts. It's nuts that they were able to achieve it, you know.
Batshit.
Yeah, it's an absolutely crazy case, that whole Alive story. And yeah, it's just like when the avalanches keep coming in on them and stuff, like, and like, do you know what I mean? They get set up kind of a little bit, and they're
Yeah.
like, "Oh yeah, we're all right now," and then next thing, a fucking avalanche hits them
Just
again.
one thing
They
after
lose a couple
another.
of lads, and they're like, "Oh fuck, they're
Yeah.
dead." And then, you know, it's an
But
absolutely
it was
crazy
for
story.
me, it was a prime example of like this doesn't need like the evil or paranormal
No,
influence. It was
no,
just
it's
this
just
is
interesting.
an amazing feat of just human perseverance. And
Hmm.
I mean, fuck, what else can you say? Like if I was in that situation, I would have been curled up in a ball,
Oh
frozen
yeah.
to death, crying. Like, you know
Yeah,
what
man,
I mean?
it would have been fucking, it would have been tough shit. Like it was legitimately a scary time. But sure, we're at an
Yeah,
hour, so we'll get
Jesus.
ready to wrap up. And we go for another two or three. I'd say no bother. It's the gift of the gab when you get two Irish people together, you see.
Yeah, I have
It's
an awful habit of fucking waffling on as well.
it's the
Um,
Irish thing. What have you got anything you'd like to plug before we get out of here?
uh, my biggest thing is Houston Strange at the minute is
Yeah.
just the biggest that's where kind of all my time is going.
So that's basically your main project at the moment, like, which, yeah, where you're getting, like, it's where you're putting all your effort into, which is fair.
Yeah, and like right now we're trying to balance weekly creep because like we love doing it and we have like
Mm-hmm.
a core audience and stuff like that, and it's great to be back doing that as well.
Mm-hmm.
It keeps me in practice because
Mm-hmm.
like I still make stupid mistakes every week. Like last week
Mm-hmm.
the camera was completely underexposed.
I've done
uh
that before. Yeah,
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 nightmare. But no, with Houston Strange though, it's fun because I'm writing the little music scores, I'm
class,
like
man.
making
Yeah.
sound effects and shit like that. It's good crack. Hopefully I can I do it justice
Mm.
because this is real people's stories and experiences and shit that they're still actively going through today. Like, you know what I mean? So
Yeah, and I think we have quite a few listeners in Texas. It's like I think it might actually be our biggest city in America, biggest
oh
state,
cool,
sorry,
yeah.
in America. That or California to kind of bulk all, you know, to chop and change. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and likewise on your feed, if anyone likes what they hear, you can head on over to my podcast, which is mine and Eamon's podcast, which is Monster Fuzz, and I just kicked my webcam there actually.
You're
And
all right.
yeah, we release twice a week.
Yeah,
We
you guys actually do it like solid though, in
Yeah,
fairness, because every time I open Spotify, there's a new Monster Fuzz or Mini Fuzz or something
500
out.
episodes, man. Over 500
Jesus
episodes.
Christ.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. We've done, so when you count Patreon episodes as well, like Patreon stuff, yeah, we've done probably 550, I'd say, something like that. Like minifos alone were at something like, I think episode like 210, 215, and like those were started a while after we started the main episode. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's crazy. It's great fun. What we do is we just basically, the reason that we're able to put out 2 per week is because we record both back to back. Do you know what I mean? We just sit down for
Right,
2.5, 3 hours, record the 2 episodes, we're done. So yeah, if you want to check that out, it's a similar subject matter. I think people will dig it as well. And likewise, the weekly creep, you probably have a good backlog of episodes now as well, right?
I think we're just around 100 and
Well,
something,
that's
yeah. And
great.
then
Like,
like
so
if
if
there'd
anyone's
be a
looking for
few
stuff,
other like random shit sprinkled in through, but
yeah,
yeah, the one thing I will say, never start from the beginning.
right, yeah.
Pick a nice middle ground and just go from there, you know what I mean?
Go with the topic that interests you.
Yeah.
Yeah, ours is, yeah, our first few episodes audio quality is fucking rough. Jesus, it's not great. But yeah, sure. Look, we'll leave it there.
Right on. This was great, man. We'll definitely have to do it again soon.
We will absolutely, and when you get into the podcast nice and deep as well, we'll have you back on. We'll talk about some experiences and stuff like that, I think. Yeah.
Ah, yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah, yeah.
All right. Thanks for listening, everyone. Over and out.
Bye.